Good morning, viewers and listeners. The date is 12/26/2020. That's right. The day after Christmas. We keep it going. We do not stop here at the Tailgate show, NFL Draft Bible. All right. I am Big Law. As usual, I got my regular suspects. My man John Murphy on the bottom. My man Ryan on the top left of your screen. I see you guys. I seem like you're in good moods. John flashing the big smile this morning. What's going on, John?
I'm just waiting for your Yardbirds to get grilled later.
Okay. How you doing this morning, my man Ryan Roberts?
All good, man. All good. How are you guys?
Pretty good. Of course, John is the vice president of player personnel for the Toronto Argonauts, and of course, Ryan Roberts runs the draft, the NFL Draft Bible scouting department here, and we're growing. Got a lot of big announcements coming up, and like I said, this is the NFL Draft Bible tailgate show Saturday morning. So, with that being said, guys, let's kind of jump into what we got going on. My man John Murphy down south, deep down south in Louisiana. Looks like we got a good game today with Louisiana and University of Texas San Antonio, UTSA, going into the Serve Pro Bowl on ABC at 3:30 today. What can you tell me about this bowl going on today?
Well, we've heard the first thing is that UTSA may be without their head coach, Jeff Traylor, tested positive. So I guess we'll find out if Barry Lunney is going to run the team, the UTSA offensive coordinator. They're a run-based team. Sincere McCormick is probably their best player, over 1,000-yard rusher. This would be the key to the game for UTSA, that is the one area that at times, Louisiana University has had struggles with. They are giving up 180 on the ground. Now, they only give up 166 through the air, which is really impressive. But 180 on the ground, that is an area that UTSA, with a dual-purpose quarterback and with Sincere McCormick, maybe can make some headway, in terms of controlling the clock, keep the ball away from UL and their offense. I mean, they have three dynamic running backs, have a quarterback in Lewis who can make a lot of plays. Chris Smith on special teams has ruined people's afternoons consistently throughout the year. I think ULL has too much for them. This is their best year that they've had in recent memory, and it would be a huge letdown to get all the way to the finish line here and get to your bowl game and lose, to a UT San Antonio team. Two programs very much in the right direction, in terms of when you're looking at where they've come from and where they're at today. It's a 14-point line. I think that's pretty fair. I think, it is about a 7-point difference in each half, and I got UL kind of pulling away in the second half. Too much offense, I think, on their standpoint. And if they can concentrate their defensive efforts against Sincere McCormick and kind of keep him in check, I see a mid-30s, 10 to 14-point win, for UL. And winning, like I said, having a one-loss season, right? When you go back and remember what some of those, years, some lean years that were there, the lean years have now traveled up north to ULM, football-wise, but they really put themselves on the map, and I would expect to see UL on a conference schedule against a Big 12, an SEC, and ACC. There's going to be teams that want to add them to their schedule to kind of get some of the fluff off and add them up. And then you're going to see Billy Napier's name continue to get mentioned for these bigger jobs. And I think it was the right decision. I don't think you go to Auburn when you see a coach that could consistently win 8+ games and also be on the hot seat. That's probably not somewhere that's going to be really comfortable to go to. If you're in his situation where you have a one-loss team. We were just mentioning it. There's a chance that, Elijah Mitchell probably goes NFL. But, you have, Trey Regis and Chris Smith for sure, Smith being back. You could have a lot of your, components back, to a team that nearly ran the table this year. And would have a really good chance of being the odds-on favorite again next year. I think you stay where you are until the really good or right opportunity presents itself. And we've mentioned he could be a guy, that if some really, really big-name coaches ever remove themselves from their post, he's going to be in the mix for, those super high-end jobs, and maybe a couple of 10-1 seasons on your record doesn't do bad for you.
Well, this is what I can say. You're down there in the middle of this ridiculous hotbed of talent in the state of Louisiana, and outside of LSU, which is still a team full of talented players, the state, all the schools that are in state are just going just going off the charts right now when it comes to talent. And I mean, just that whole Gulf region as well. I mean, if you had to rank the state of Louisiana when it comes to talented states or talent that's pulled from the state, where would you rank the state of Louisiana as far as states' rankings for recruiting and talent?
Well, I think you got it two different ways here, because you have the larger states that are going to produce, in terms of Texas and California, and even Florida. So if you broke it down to the size of the state, you'd almost have to say it's top three. Because of the size of the state, you should not be getting that much talent for the size of the state that you're in. And I think the good thing is they have that same hotbed the way that it is in Florida, and the same in Texas, where you have it, in the South, in the New Orleans area, then you have it again in Baton Rouge, and then you have it again, up northern Louisiana, where you can kind of decide on what you're looking for, and you can find basically a lot of skill guys, and DBs in the South, and then you can find, a lot of linebacker, running back, D-line, type guys, and then O-line, D-line guys up in the north. And then there's a combination of where the quarterbacks, depending on what style of football you're looking for, throughout the state. So I think per capita, when you shrink it down, California is massive. Texas is massive. You look at the size of Louisiana, and then you look at the high-end prospects, that are coming out of it. And again, we made mention of it, Tulane 3 straight years in a bowl game. I think La Tech is 4 or 5 years, straight, now in a game. UL on the turn that they're in. And when you add in the secondary levels, you look how good, people forget because it's been now a year since they played, how well Nicholls State's played the last 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
How good of a program McNeese State is. And now they have Frank Wilson, an in-state coach, coming back, oddly enough, from UTSA, as he was their former head coach, there. So, you look at that, and then you take it to the HBCU level and say there's Grambling and Southern. Right. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you just look across the board, and the amount of talent, that comes in and comes out of Louisiana. Like I said, per capita for the size of the region, that's a pretty outstanding, selection, and a lot of, on a regular Saturday afternoon, a really good selection and variables, of talent and games to go watch on a regular basis. So unfortunately, we look forward to the spring. Right, because we'll have Nicholls and Southern and Grambling and McNeese playing, and then like I said, when you look at just the upturn of those 3 other programs and the expectation with another top 5 recruiting class at LSU, it should be that they're back in terms of having multiple schools again in bowl games in 2021.
If we picked Louisiana as the third best talent-laden state, what's 1 and 2 for you?
Probably Texas and Florida.
Texas and Florida. You guys are nipping on the heels of Florida. I'm gonna tell you that right now. The way that this talent is just flowing out of the state. But I know you're gonna keep us on top of that. Ryan Roberts, coming to you, buddy. Now we're gonna look at this Lending Tree Bowl coming up today at 3:30. We got Western Kentucky and Georgia State going. They had an impressive Georgia State. They had an impressive quarterback that I was looking at the beginning of the year. What can you tell me about him and about this bowl game coming up this afternoon?
Well, if you're interested in 2021 NFL draft prospects, this probably isn't the bowl game that is going to be the one for you. But like you said, Big Law, they have a interesting quarterback, redshirt freshman Cornelius Brown, all 6'5", 200 pounds, athletic. Kid can spin it. There are definitely building blocks for him to be a very interesting quarterback down the road. He's actually has a wide receiver that is like him. He's a tower. 6'4", Sam Pinckney, who leads the team in receiving over 700 yards. Very interesting height, weight, speed guy. those are kind of the guys offensively for both sides of the football because, Western Kentucky has Tyrell Pilgrim, who was a former transfer from Maryland, who has done a steady job at quarterback, but nothing fantastic, nothing flashy about him. Those are probably the two guys offensively that you're going to want to keep an eye on is Cornelius Brown and Sam Pinckney on Georgia State side of everything. They also have – this is kind of the small school pass rushers little exhibition here because we have Jordan Strachan for Georgia State, who has not gotten much conversation because in 2019 he missed the entire season recovering from a lower leg injury, but he leads the team in tackles for loss, sacks. He's 6'4", little light, but he's really rangy, really athletic. And on the other side, I'm not sure if he's going to play because I think he missed last game, but Western Kentucky probably has the best draft prospect potentially for 2021 NFL draft, and that's Angelo Malone, who's number 10, who's their outside linebacker in their odd man front. He's that traditional 3-4 rush backer who's very athletic, can play a little bit in space. He's got talent to do a variety of things for an NFL defense, potentially moving forward. There's been some conversation about top 100, top 150, somewhere in that range. From my knowledge, he might be a candidate to go back to school to use that additional year of eligibility. So I'm not sure if we'll see D'Angelo Malone in the 2021 NFL draft, but he's the most talented football player that's going to be on the side for either player, at least in the next couple years as far as NFL draft prospects are concerned. So keep your eye for number 10 if he's playing for Western Kentucky. At the end of the day, I'm buying into what Georgia State has, the young guys they have offensively. I think they're going to be able to outscore Western Kentucky that has been struggling offensively this year, despite them having a pretty rock-solid defense. Give me Georgia State in this game, young Cornelius Brown, young Sam Pinckney to pull it out against Western Kentucky, who has a solid defense, but I don't think they have the offense to quite keep pace.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that Georgia State, I think they're just, like you said, the building blocks are there, quarterback, wide receiver, and they're going to open, the offense, they run it wide open. It puts me in the mind of how Miami runs their, the fast break offense. I seen them put up almost 50 points or right over 50 points on ECU early in the year. And I was like, these guys are phenomenal. As far as a young, talented team, just building towards the future. And we'll see, how this game goes. And we'll pay attention to that. I'm going to talk about a game that I mentioned yesterday. And I know that my man, John Murphy and I are at odds, when it comes to these Chanticleers of Coastal Carolina in South Carolina. All right. On the beach, that is Myrtle. So right now they play Liberty. All right. The Fighting Christians. Okay. Actually, Fighting Christians used to be called the Elon. Okay. But they are the Fighting Christians, the Liberty Flames. They will be fighting the Mullets of Coastal Carolina today. And this is going to be a really good bowl. This is the Cure Bowl. It's going to be on at 7:30 tonight on ESPN. This is a redo of a game that they tried to put together, but Liberty had COVID issues, so they had to cancel the game. And then, of course, the Chanticleers took on BYU, which then turned into a huge upset. I mean, some people didn't think it was that big of an upset. I think it was. It was a small school, really didn't have that much notoriety. Hadn't really been a D1, full-blown D1 program for quite some time to go in and beat a more tenured and respected old-school BYU program. I'm looking at Grayson McCall. I think the kid's amazing. That they have a great running back as well. The only thing is they have a Cam Newton type-esque quarterback across the field. Mr. Malik Willis with 20 touchdowns, 10 passing touchdowns, 10 rushing touchdowns. The kid's amazing. John, you had made a statement saying that the guy should actually got a Heisman vote, as talented as he is, and the team winning as much. You give me a little bit more of how you feel about this game. I know we're kind of at odds.
I think Mr. Landry that plays for the Browns said it best. Today, Malik Willis should just bless them on that other sideline with his presence and take it to the house at least 5 times on himself. Ooh. Look at what Kamara did yesterday. There you go, Malik Willis. There's your weekend.
Okay.
And we should just look at history, right? Sometimes the first religious movement doesn't work. It's the second or third time. So the Mormons couldn't get it done. So they'll send the Christians in to take care of the Yardbirds today. Ryan, I don't know about you, but I got some Yardbird nuggets. We got the grill this afternoon. We're gonna get LJ this afternoon because he's not gonna keep talking about the Chanticleers. Chanticleers.
John, I'm buying the Malik Willis hype a little bit. I actually watched him 2 days ago.
That's what I said. You know what?
He's got something.
You know, like even if he's just the fifth, you know, like however many guys you put on your list, just give him one vote. I don't care if it's number 10. He can just have one little number 10 vote. You know, because like I said, the best part of this game is that the two schools deserve a ton of credit for saying, yes, put it back on the schedule. Let's do it for real. Because you could easily have taken, you know, a lesser challenge, or, you know, like just kind of gone for, you know, trying to play a team that has a more recognizable name. Know you could go beat them this year, you know, and get a layup against a South Carolina or, you know, a team like that was playing in a bowl game, you know. So instead, playing each other, I think it helps out both. And I think it really helps out the non-Power 5, you know, clubs, because this could turn out to be one of the best games that we watch in terms of just on paper. This is one of the better bowl games on paper, you know, just when you look at what both schools have accomplished and the type of matchup it could be, because Liberty could give them a lot of different issues offensively than what BYU is coming in, you know, there, you know, where they were able to kind of stop that. This is a very different, you know, offense that Liberty is running there. So to me, it is on Malik Willis's shoulder and feet to get the job done. You know, so to me, that's, you know, that's to where I think the benefit could be for them. But hats off to both teams for the seasons they've had. We just want to get ourselves some Yardbird nuggets and have LJ kind of break his streak, because he's on a good one there. We can't forget, Ryan. We can't forget he picked against Notre Dame. We're not going to forget about that anytime soon.
We're not going to forget.
Orange over there.
I stayed in the state of South Carolina, and it's done me well.
Yeah, well, hey, guess what? You're only going to be able to go watch Liberty on the road next year because your pass is getting revoked.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure.
I think one cool thing about this game, too, is some of these games we're going to be talking about a lot of guys opting out. This is a big game for Liberty. It's a big game for Coastal Carolina. Even the guys that might have NFL potential, like the Teron Jackson, I'm sure they're playing today, man, because this has been a monumental season. They don't want to end it off in a bad note, you know? We're not talking about Miami of the world where we have several guys opting out. Oklahoma State, we'll talk about a couple guys that have already opted out. Like, both these teams are going to be at full capacity. They're going to play to win the football game. So it's going to be a really fun matchup.
Well, and the other two things is you have, you know, the head coach at Coastal, who is going to become a hot name and hot commodity.
Mm-hmm.
You know that Hugh Freeze already is. You know, Ken Austin has been a head coach in multiple places, both NCAA and in the CFL. So he has a chance, you know, riding the Malik Willis train, you know, back, you know, to a head coaching job. And the other part is these are going to be two really hotbed places for that transfer portal, because kids that are in the SEC or ACC that are now looking for somewhere to go, you now know you can get to the NFL. You're going to be on ESPN. You're on a top 25 program. Those are two spots that are going to be, you know, really a hotbed for, you know, receiving transfers, right? So other schools are worried about losing them. These are two of the inbound programs that are going to be like, hey, we're right here. You know, come over here. You know, we got plenty of room for good players. And if you've ever been to around either one of, you know, where those two universities are, I mean, you don't have to say too much about Coastal Carolina because it's Myrtle Beach.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you already saw the talent when they showed the pregame over there. You know, and so you go to Liberty, though, another underrated college campus and university.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, you know, amount of resources that school has in terms of off the field, in terms of the education opportunities there at Liberty. Yeah, you know, those are two schools that are going to benefit from the type of season that they've had, and the factor that they've put so much more emphasis when these two programs have played the number of games that they've played on a weekly basis. ESPN and Fox Sports and our show have been able to talk about them on a weekly basis. Why? Because they've been playing. You know, so they've got a lot more chatter, you know, coming. And, you know, you look at the same thing. UL first week, you know, jumps out with a staple win. That was only a game that was really put on major television because there were other games that weren't available, you know, week one. You know, so I'm still looking at Liberty as a W here. And I think it's really based on Malik Willis. and what he's done to date. And it'll be really interesting to see how many of these guys that can come back do come back to these two programs. Because if so, you'll have another battle of top 20 again next year.
Absolutely. You're looking at an 11-0 Liberty. 11-0 Coastal Carolina and a 9-1 Liberty program. So, both of these schools, are finishing on such a strong run. And I can't wait to see what this game really boils down to. They got a primetime spot. So a lot of eyes are going to be on this. And the kind of records that they do have are almost visually, you would think they would be in a bigger bowl. A lot of times you see a lot of the teams with, 0 losses, 1 loss playing later, in the bowl season. These are obviously two good teams playing early on in this bowl season, and we're going to see how it all shakes out. Moving on, my man John Murphy. Looks like we got the Valero Alamo Bowl, out of in Texas tonight. It's a late game on CBS, and now Texas playing Colorado. They're no, they know each other pretty well. What can you tell me about this bowl game that's going on tonight?
Well, actually, I think it's a Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken.
You are correct. The 29th. That's right, 29th.
Yeah.
You are correct.
So, for Texas, it's a veteran group, especially a quarterback with Sam Ehlinger going out, not exactly probably, how they would have hoped. They're still ranked in the top 25. But if you would have asked them, back then when they're getting Ehlinger into the program, is this where they expect it to be 4 years later when he's potentially leaving the program? Probably not. For Colorado, this is icing on the cake, right? To me, this is one of the better jobs, done by folks. You lose Mel Tucker, and what he means to a program as a head coach and an influence on the roster, and you lose him surprisingly in an offseason that doesn't then have spring drills or fall drills the way that you expected to have them. They're able to go back and re-recruit. Speaking of the transfer portal, Sam Neuer last year was playing special teams and was a third-string safety. Mm-hmm. They re-recruit him back into the program, and he's their starting quarterback. Now, the stats aren't flashy, but he is able to run the ball and produce enough offensively to where they're 4-1. And you got to give them just a ton of credit for how they've played. Unfortunately, they lost their best pro prospect. I think that's an Achilles injury to linebacker Nate Landman. Is that correct, Ryan?
Yep, that's what I heard.
Yeah, so for him, maybe this extra year, thing bodes well, and you just stay in college and rehab and come back and play next fall, potentially. I even think the Ehlinger thing is really interesting and intriguing. You're not a high-end draft pick. Do you try to come back and go out in a different way than where you're going out, right? They've already seemingly said enough times that Tom Herman is safe. Mm-hmm. How safe is he going to be next year with a underclassman quarterback with Oklahoma trending the way they are? With Ehlinger, at least he's given them a chance in these games. They haven't won any of them, but at least they've been in them. So it'll be interesting to see if this is this his last hurrah, or could you potentially find a way for him to, decide that, the best option for him is coming back there? Because I'll tell you one thing, what they have found is they have found their next running back. Because Bijan Robinson is for sure a real dude. That guy is for sure. They have hit on one guy in the recruiting, that class for sure with that kid. But they're going to lose Asai on the defensive side of the ball, which would be a tough guy to lose and replace. And I just think that there is still some tweaks there defensively for them that have to be made when you're playing in a conference where, on the most part, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Oklahoma are going to put up points. You got to find a way to slow the track meet down, and that means you either have to cover it better or you have to produce more pressure. Because they had some of it going in the first half of that game against Oklahoma, and then they didn't. And they haven't really, for the most part. And you look at the year before against LSU, and they couldn't slow down that track meet, against them either. So, they're in some of those games, but they're not at the end and at the finish line. I think this is a big need for them to beat Colorado just to finish 7-3. If you lose to Colorado, to me, I don't see how you stay in the top 25, as a 4-loss team losing to Colorado. I think this is a good game, but I think Texas outmans Colorado, in this game, because the one thing, he's running it well offensively. They're just not a threat to score north of early 20, 25 points without a defensive or special teams or, a couple of interesting things going on, for Colorado. So I got Texas winning, but to me, the more important thing is here, you're losing, Cosme on the offensive side. You're losing Osai on the defensive side. What does the quarterback decide to do if he is really getting kind of more 5th to 7th round, type grades, and knows that I'm really not a threat to dress next year in the NFL? I'm probably a 3. I'm holding a clipboard. I'm learning and things, but I got a lot of process to go in order to really be considered an NFL, style quarterback, and things. Do I want that, or do I want a chance to come back and do something, at Texas, kind of along the lines of what Ian Book, do you come back and do a 5th year, because there's a kind of a greater upside to doing that this year than it would have been, trying to go to the NFL. I could see Ehlinger, in the same kind of conversations here in the coming weeks. And if not, you will definitely then see Texas will be a major player, an even more major player in what we are now guessing that it's going to be called, NCAA free agency, or I don't know what our new word for this transfer portal is, but I'm anxious on Monday, to see 2 things. Can I get a double-digit lead on Rick again? And are we anywhere near 1,000 guys in the transfer portal?
Crazy.
I mean, we were at 794 prior to the holiday, so, what will that number be next week?
It's got to be over 800 too. And a really cool moment I would like to put out there too, John, because you mentioned Colorado 4-1, right? Exceeding expectations in Carl Durrell's first year. I didn't think there were much expectations going into this year at all, especially with Sam Neuer and who's playing quarterback and all that type of stuff. Jarek Broussard has had a great year as a running back, over 800 yards in 5 games, 6.3 yards a carry. But the coolest moments, I think, are you have these 2 wide receivers, these 2 young guys, right? You want to talk about blast from the past for a second? Levante Chenault, because we just saw LaVisca tear it up for Colorado for a couple years as their do-it-all threat. Levante's kind of that more traditional wide receiver. And then I'm watching a game 2 weeks ago where it is Brendan Rice kid, right, a wide receiver, 61-yard touchdown reception. I'm like, that's nice. That's cool. And then he takes a punt back, too. I'm like, man, this kid's got some juice. He's 6'3". I look him up. He's Jerry Rice's son. How have I not known about this? I've heard a single word about this Brendan Rice kid being Jerry Rice's son. But, man, 2 touches for over 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm like, true freshman. I got to keep an eye out for it, man. And I'm not really sure. I remember when Jerry Rice Jr. was at UCLA, he wasn't good at all, but you heard about him a little bit. Why have I not heard about this Brendan Rice kid? I'm just very curious about that one.
Yeah, well, we know one thing that happened. Brendan Rice got Jerry's height. Jerry Rice Jr. got his mama's height. That was the problem. 5'10" Jerry Rice Jr. was Jerry Rice Jr. Brendan Rice is a grown-ass man, boy. That kid, he's right off the bus, too. So, that's him doing that as a freshman, there. So I think it actually benefits Brendan Rice that so many of us, when we were watching him and seeing that happen, did not know that that's who he was.
Right.
If I'm that kid, that is the luckiest thing that could happen to me, is that I was able to create a moment for myself before everybody was saying, oh, well, 3 catches for 25. Oh, you're Jerry Rice's kid. You don't want to be that, right? Like the first track meet that Tyreek Hill's kid goes to, can I at least get a race under my belt first before you comparing my times?
Right.
That's right. So, I think that really benefits that kid, there. But when you look, Colorado is another team, that should be able to recruit a really good quarterback, out there when you consider the 3 weapons that they have and that they're known for having good offensive lines. And the one thing you got to talk about, the one thing Darrell can do is he can put a good offense together, and it's showing it, like I said, this year by using a guy that last year was running down on teams and was a third-string safety, is playing quarterback for you a year later with no spring and no fall drills. It's showing you that, sometimes, good things happen out of something bad. Michigan State definitely benefits, long-term from Mel Tucker, but, maybe Carl Durrell for some of the little things that have happened at UCLA and Miami, some of the places he's been that, he's unfortunately taken the fall, along with those staffs. He may have lucked into a job here and now is really thriving in it.
Well, I look at, thinking about Texas here, going back to Texas, they have had the resources, there's infinite resources, in order to build a program, to pay people. And with this new portal that you're talking about, it's almost like, all right, you got your super elites, your 3, 4, 5 teams that are your super elites in college football. And now with this portal opening up, will Texas go back, maybe get back into the top super elites, with this new way of recruiting. That's what I'm really interested in, to see how Texas goes with this, because that's one of the schools that, even though they haven't been as good as you would think a Texas team should be based on lineage, that they should have a better record based on the resources that they do have. So,
yeah, I will tell you this, that one of the areas, and sometimes people overlook it, is when you look around, and A&M has done this, so now maybe Texas is going to have to kind of catch up. When you talk about resources, we've mentioned, don't always just look at the head coach. Look who else is able to be hired. Mm-hmm. But the other part is the resources down there, in terms of, if you went down there and looked at what it looked like 10 or 12 years ago, it was as good as anybody.
Right.
Some of it around the university is of need of some 2020 upgrade. Right? It doesn't look like Alabama or LSU or A&M for that matter. Right? You're starting not to have those resources in terms of, I think you need some of that polish on the locker room, the weight room, the workout, like all of the other intricacies of running a major top 10 program is some of it that needs to start being looked at, in terms of saying, well, we don't have to do that, right? Like, we're Texas. We don't have to do that. We're so-and-so. We don't, and if you look around, Florida and Miami and Florida State, they're some of those programs did that in the 90s and early 2000s. And then all of a sudden, here came FAU in Boca. Here came FIU. And you would look at the resources of what they built on those campuses, and you were like, oh my, wow. Like Schnellenberger had some better facilities, than the U and others. And he knew that was attracting athletes to look at where the U was and some of their lack of, resources and dorms and, places where these kids are spending their time. And he knew, hey, I'm getting you on the field faster. I have a good as resume as anybody in the state, and kind of come look at what I have going on over here. And I think you've heard that keeping up with the SEC is a perfect, kind of companion to that, to say, hey, Kentucky has had to put a number of resources into effect. It's not just bringing Stoops and Anwar Stewart back to the program and people like that. It's all of a sudden, hey, we're going to challenge to spend some money on football the way we have in basketball. Right. And I think that's the same type thing there at Texas is you're losing guys to other places, but you're also losing it because some of your facility needs that kind of that little 2020 spin that you may not have thought you needed to do that. But hey, guess what? It wasn't too long ago that Notre Dame didn't think they needed any of that either. Ooh. And what happened? There was a swoon, what kind of guys you were getting your hands on. And when you look at it, Miami has had that swoon. Florida State has had it. Notre Dame has had it. USC and UCLA have had it in a big way. in recent times. What programs have continued to better themselves? Oregon, Oklahoma State, right?
Clemson.
You start looking at where these programs that have, ascended and then continued to ascend after that period of time. What do they have in common? Look at their facilities are outrageous, right? So I think the Texas has to look at that, and say A&M just finished, I think, a 5 to 7 year, program down there that redid the stadium for sure, and different aspects on campus and even around campus. Yeah, if you're getting beat in state on the field in terms of A&M's over in their own world in the SEC and you're over here in the Big 12, but if they're beating you to the punch, they're in a much different spot, right? Kellen Mond, like him or, love or hate him or anything in between. They finished top 5 right outside.
Yeah.
You're in the top 20 at 20 facing Colorado, right? So now where are you at and where is that 5 years later? A&M is on the map with Jimbo Fisher. You hired
That's right.
your guy Herman from Ohio State, and where are you? Pretty much right where you were with Charlie Strong. You've got to be honest. You're not that far ahead of where you were when you kept making those changes and went away from where you were. And the problem to me is the same off-field, scenario in terms of what Charlie Strong had available to him in terms of just the optics and the metrics. Not any real difference now with Tom Herman there. So I think the money is the outside the program money, and resources may need a little doctoring as much as, the recruiting and some of the stuff defensively in order to upgrade on the field.
Wow, great observation there, man. I didn't know that that was the reason. Some of the reasons why Texas, is kind of like you say in the down swoon where they are right now. Speaking of that, Liberty has done what you said that program should do. Liberty, they bought up a ton of area, land in Lynchburg, and they have totally upgraded their facilities. And you have players coming, like to attract a guy like Malik Willis to come out of the SEC to come there and pretty much rip up the independent circuit, So
and you can tell, and this is totally outside our venue of what we talk about on the regular. You want to do yourself a favor, go Google Grand Canyon University and see why they've become a real basketball program. It's not just the on-court part of what they've done. It's look what those kids are walking into, and then look behind the scenes of, well, we have the connection to the NBA, we have this, and then look what you're walking into there. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Right? So you got to look at what, the keeping up with the Joneses is not just the recruiting of the Joneses. It's what do these guys have? You go look at those locker rooms in the NCAA, and there's a lot of them that are outshining the NFL locker rooms just in terms of kids that age, 18 to 21. They still want what you got going on there, right? There's nothing wrong with coming
digital this, digital that,
to that digital locker room, and your name's up on there, and your little video highlights are running in your locker, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, Rick, where are you at? We ain't got none of that. Where's the highlights of Ryan pulling out his mock draft? We ain't got none of that.
Well, according to John Murphy, there is no highlights. So,
well, there's just lights.
Just lights. Yep, exactly.
Fake news, a little fake news, and some lights.
Bells and whistles.
Yeah,
true enough. We're gonna have him start doing just the 7th round.
Well, oh Lord, y'all are crazy. Moving on to the next bowl. Now, this bowl, I've been to this bowl a couple times. It used to be called the Belk Bowl, but now it's called the Duke's Mayo Bowl. All right. My man Ryan Roberts, Wake Forest plays Wisconsin in this game today. Give me an idea and tell me what you think about this game. Of course, you got a Big Ten team coming down to face a ACC team. What you got for me on this?
Well, I think it's really interesting because I'm going to go to the quarterbacks first, and we have two quarterbacks that are going in completely opposite directions during the latter stages of this season. After the first game, not only were people talking about Wisconsin maybe being a real player in the Big Ten, maybe a real player nationally, they're talking about this redshirt freshman quarterback, Graham Mertz, maybe being the next big thing. And then they went through their issues with COVID and having to go through the protocols and a lot of players testing positive and quarantining and all this stuff that they had to kind of go through behind the scenes. And since the return and since back to somewhat we'll see it abnormal season has not looked great down the stretch through most of the season, actually. And he's a redshirt freshman, so we're not going to harp on him too much because that's to be expected. There's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. Sam Hartman, adversely, has been very good. He's showed a lot of potential, especially in the North Carolina game. I mean, he looked like he was on the brink of being something special. So we're taking a look now at two quarterbacks that are going in the complete opposite directions. Wisconsin is limping to the finish here at 3-3. I'm sure they're not too excited to be in this bowl game. Wake Forest, on the other hand, I'm sure is ecstatic to be in the position they are because I don't think they had crazy expectations going into the year after a down year last year. Is Carlos Basham going to play in his final game? That remains to be seen. I think he was a little banged up. I think he'd only played I think he missed a couple games during the season. But if we're talking NFL draft perspective for 2021 NFL draft, it has to start with Carlos Basham, the defensive end for Wake Forest. Boogie Basham, 6'4", 285 pounds. He plays in their even front at defensive end. I think he's a guy that a lot of NFL teams are going to value using him. Versatility, rush alignment, all over the line of scrimmage. I think he can do some stuff inside and out. I think that's really what's going to be the real big selling point to a guy like Basham. And he has an opportunity to go against. It's not the most talented Wisconsin offensive line we've ever seen, but we know that Wisconsin traditionally has some guys up front. So they still have guys like Cole Van Lannon, Logan Bruss, Josh Seltz, and they're guys that are going to get looks, maybe not the high-end offensive line talent we're used to at Wisconsin, but still solid college football players. Absolutely. Guys that'll get looks at the next level. So if Basham's playing, I'm really interested to see how he performs. Now, my initial thought is Wisconsin is a more talented football team than Wake Forest. But when I really look at it, I take a step back, look at the full scope. I think Wake Forest is going to be excited to be in the position they are, and I don't think Wisconsin is going to be. So I'm going to call a slight upset here. I'm going to say Wake Forest takes down Wisconsin in this bowl game.
Now I'm looking at like Boogie Basham. I mean, he's a full legit first round pick talent. You know, I mean, do you feel that way?
I mean, I was never on the first round hype. I think he's a day two quality defensive lineman that can do. I think he can do a lot of good things. I can see him going early in round two. I don't think that he is the greatest athlete of all time, and I don't think he's a clear. I don't think he's a guy where you're saying you're a 4-3 defensive end every single snap, and you have that bend and you have that flexibility to be that guy that's going to be a high volume sack guy. But what I think he is he's a versatile piece that NFL defense are really going to enjoy implementing him from various alignments and giving him advantages athletically. I think that's what his strong suit is. Could he be in the first round? I wouldn't count it out of question, but where I value more right now is somewhere early on day two.
Yeah, I've seen him just destroy ACC offensive linemen. He's a guy who I feel like, wow, if he ever, puts on a few more pounds, works on his explosiveness, keeps working on those hands, I think, he could jump up. But yeah, that'll be a great game to check out as well. Continuing with you, Ryan, we're going to talk about this next bowl, the Cheez-It Bowl, which is the 29th of December coming up. It's a big game. You're going to have Oklahoma State playing the U, another, game that, a lot of these bowl games, a lot of people say, they're just throwing two teams together, trying to get the money and just going to, play this game and get out of here. But I think this is a good game coming up here. Oklahoma State and Miami got something to prove, especially coming down the end there. Miami feeling like, I think they deserved a little bit more than what they got.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would love this matchup if both teams were at full strength, playing everybody. Unfortunately, this is one of those games that I kind of highlighted earlier that we had a few opt-outs, leading up to this game. Obviously, Gregory Rousseau was before the season for Miami, but now their other talented defensive end, Jalen Phillips, just made his declaration to the NFL draft the other day. He's not going to be playing in this football game. Offensive tackle for Oklahoma State, who I'm a big fan of, Tevin Jenkins, is also an opt-out. Chuba Hubbard is done completely for Oklahoma State now, so he won't be in this football game. So some of the stars that we thought maybe coming in that we really were excited about are not going to be playing in this football game. Now, that being said, we still have some talented players. Oklahoma State has Tylan Wallace, who has been a contributor for 3 years now, a talented wide receiver. in the vein of a Sterling Shepard type of wide receiver, I believe, at the next level. Kind of has some inside-outside look to him. I don't think he's a perfect fit outside on a full-time basis, but I think he's a guy that you can line up at different spots, and he does a very solid job at the catch point, has some chops as a route runner. He has some ability there. One guy that I really want to highlight that I thought has had a great season that not too many people are talking about. He's going to the Senior Bowl for Oklahoma State, though. Rodarius Williams, who is the brother of Greedy Williams, who was drafted from LSU last year from now with the Cleveland Browns. He's had a really solid season. He's a bigger corner, physical, not the greatest athlete in the world, but if you're just talking press man corner, I think that Rodarius Williams really gets after it. And then on the Miami side of things, some guys to keep an eye out for. Quincy Rochet, to my knowledge, is playing in this game, the defensive end that was transferred from Temple. He's a highly productive pass rusher. Bubba Bolden, the transfer from USC originally, that's now in his second year at Miami, first year full-time starter at safety, number 21. I know he was a little banged up at the end of the season, so I won't know if he's definitely going to be there, but he's a highly talented safety, number 21. Keep an eye out for him, about 6'2" plus, 200 plus pounds. Can do a little bit of everything. He can play on the roof. He can come down in the box. He can play in the slot. He can do a bunch of a plethora of things. And then I think the guy that everyone's going to want to watch is D'Eriq King, the quarterback for Miami. Is he a quarterback at the next level? I don't know. What I know is he's definitely an NFL athlete. Only about 5'8.5". He does not have much size to him, but he's a really fun dual threat college quarterback who's done excellent now at Houston into Miami. And he's absolutely an NFL athlete. At the end of the day, I'm with you, Big Law. I think that Miami is going to have a little too much in this game offensively to take this win out. Oklahoma State has had, some success. They have some offensive weapons. But no Hubbard, even though the backups have been playing better than Chuba Hubbard was before he, started getting banged up a little bit. I think that D'Eriq King is enough, and they have enough that they're going to take out this one. Probably a high-scoring affair, especially with a couple defenders out for Miami.
Well, we're going to have to call the opt-out players DT specials, because he has a huge issue with the players that opt out at this time of the year. So I get it. But, yeah, we're going to call those DT specials. He's a DT special. So, now that we've gotten through some of the bowls here, we're going to cover some more of the bowls next week as well as they come aboard. But, John, we're going to jump into the NFL. We had a game last night, and we're going to do one NFL game, and it was epic for one player in particular. And I wanted to bring it to you, being that you're down there in New Orleans, of course. Tell me what's going on or what happened with that Saints and Vikings game last night, a Christmas special, NFL ratings grab, as we would call it, in the industry.
Well, here I can show you what happened. This is what happened right here. This is what happened right here. All they needed was to let me in the door.
That's all it is,
Offense started clicking again, and it put me in the door, and the offense started clicking. So again, hats off. Very much. I mentioned it yesterday. Very much appreciate it. Had a couple conversations with them. So kudos as an organization with plenty, and I mean plenty of other things on their plate and agenda. For them looking out and calling me the day before and saying that they had a couple seats available. So certainly made a 12-year-old extremely excited to be able to go to a game, this year when I thought that was probably a no-go going to happen. So we can tell you one thing. We know if he ever intercepts the ball and goes for a touchdown, that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, if he does have some dance moves, he definitely got them from his mama because she was enjoying Alvin Kamara way more than either one of us two were yesterday, scoring those 6 touchdowns. If you listen after the game, I thought it was interesting that, Sean Payton, who grew up in Chicago, was thinking about when they got to 3 and 4 touchdowns, was thinking back to Gale Sayers and said that, like getting Kamara, who's a modern day all-purpose, that type of guy, by getting him that record yesterday, that the mention of Gale Sayers and the comparison or the talk around it would be who was the last guy to do that. And so in his mind, like some of the history, behind it, because if you look, they called the timeout after that long, pass down to Troutman there at the end of the game. So it was not something that they immediately knew or was set up They thought he was done and was out of the game. And when they called the timeout, he said he went over and told Kamara, "Hey, you want to go back in?"
Yeah.
And so I thought that was interesting. You saw a couple of things that we mentioned yesterday in the pregame. The pressure, was definitely, there was a big difference. One team going in the game with 40 sacks, the other one with 22. Not too many times Drew Brees was facing, a pass rush. The 2 turnovers, both off a receiver's hand. One is possibly on the quarterback, in terms of getting on the same page with the receiver. The second one, Sanders is kind of falling down or, kind of pushed down, whichever way you want to say it, off his hands. And then he comes back and makes a big play later in the game. But, when that O-line, is playing without Nick Easton, and they're playing without Andrus Peat, who might also be the worst All-Pro in the history of football. That's how much I like his play. But you're in there with 2 backup linemen, and one that a team gave up on because of some injury stuff in James Hurst. Now, you go watch James Hurst yesterday, and you tell me that Andrus Peat should get that job back, and we'll have an argument, there, because they were doing some damage, up front yesterday against the Vikings, who were without some of their guys. But again, if you're on an NFL field and you let a team run on you like this is 1980 Nebraska, that was ridiculous. Throughout the entire game, the number of carries went up, but so did the yards per carry, which was unbelievable to be averaging 10 to 13 yards a carry, when you were into the, double digit 15, 18 carries and you're still averaging, 10 plus a carry. I think you like what you saw yesterday, right? They're still playing without Michael Thomas, right? This is without Michael Thomas, without 2 starting O-linemen, so, there's still some things. Marcus Williams doesn't play yesterday, but you still see some areas of concern, which is when you are handling the pass rush, sometimes, if your last name is Jenkins, your coverage is a little suspect at the moment. And on the other side, Justin Jefferson a few times had Marcus Lattimore wishing he was covering Adam Thielen, right? So, you just see how good Justin Jefferson is and can be. And they still, for the amount of carries that they had, Dalvin Cook was still giving them trouble.
Right.
And then a big injury could be, was it an ankle, and is it a high ankle, or was it possibly an Achilles? Because Quan and Alexander has been a very different player for them in what they've been able to do with him since acquiring him, and he's their only hometown LSU guy as well. If they're without him for any period of time, that would be a difference maker in terms of the type of athlete and his ability to make plays on both sides, sideline to sideline.
Right.
Anybody else they're going to put in, you're going to have a little bit less a player in Anzalone, a little bit less a player in Craig Robertson. You're not getting the same level of talent, that Quan Alexander has given them. So I think that Sunday's game is huge. If the Titans win, now everybody's got to play next week, to get into that tie. If you have a 3-way tie, the Saints get it. So the Saints have to get either a 3-way tie for best record, or the Packers have to lose twice. Right? So they got to get either Seattle in the mix and they all finish there, or a double loss by the Packers. But I think you're having to go to Carolina next week and play all your guys, because you don't want to play for third.
Right.
And I do think, just a quick note, I think Quan Alexander is out for the rest of the year. I think it is an Achilles injury. Just putting that in there. So
the worst, one of the worst things you can have as an athlete, explosive athlete. So we just finished our football review portion, and we're going to jump to our next portion, which is the Under the Radar segment. My man Ryan has a couple for me, and this is where we talk about the talent that's in college that goes under the radar, the diamonds in the rough that nobody speaks of. Everybody wants to always know what is the next best thing. Ryan, tell me, who is one of the next best things coming out of college football?
Well, I got a couple of guys in honor of David Turner not being with us today. I picked a couple tough names for the usual chop shot. So in honor of him, I'm going to start with Syracuse defensive back Ifeatu Melifonwu, who is the younger brother of Obi. Oh, could you imagine him saying that?
I loved it. I loved it.
We'll have to get him on next week. We'll have to say Ifeatu Melifonwu. That is the younger brother of Obi Melifonwu, who came out of UConn a couple years ago. Corner/safety, was right around 6'4", 220 pounds. He had some of the most insane testing numbers you'll ever see. If you want to see just something that will absolutely blow your mind, look up Obi's numbers from the combine the year he went out. I'm pretty sure he had like a 45-inch vert at 220-plus pounds. Like, it was absolutely insanity. Incredible broad jump. Like, just the explosive numbers that he put up was something where people were starting to talk about from the media perspective. Like, hey, oh, man, this guy's got to be a first-round pick. Look at that size. Look at that speed. But if you put on the film, wasn't a very good football player. I will say this. Ifeatu was a guy that I knew had some height, had some speed, like his brother. And when I turned on the film, I was pleasantly surprised because I'm going to be very honest. It was probably the bias in me. I was like, oh, another Melifonwu. Oh, man, here we go. But 6'3" corner and press man, I think a lot of teams are going to like. In zone, cover 3 scheme. They played him a lot in off man a little bit at Syracuse too, which I wasn't a big fan of because he just has a high pedal. He's a little clunky getting in and out of his breaks. But when you look at him, usually colleges are going to list a guy at 6'3", and you're going to look at him and be like, he might be 6'1". Melifonwu is every bit of that 6'3" listing. He is a long, athletic kid.
Wow.
He was matched against Diami Brown in the game I saw against North Carolina, who's that vertical winner for North Carolina's offense, and he was stride for stride with him. I think this kid, when he opens up, he can move a little bit too. I was really impressed by Ifeatu Melifonwu. He exceeded my expectations. If he tests well, and I think he's going to test well, at 6'2" plus, 200+ pounds, I think he might be a low 4.4 kid. I think that he can open up and he can run a little bit, man. I really do. So Melifonwu thoroughly impressed me. And the other guy that I had watched him earlier in the season, but I went back and just watched, kind of some of the final tapes. I know he's a Senior Bowl guy now, is Dayo Odingbo, who is the defensive end interior pass rusher from Vanderbilt. He plays kind of that 5-tech, 4-eye in their odd man front. Now he is listed at 6'6", 275 pounds. I think he could firmly put on another 10 to 15 pounds, and he is that perfect man in an odd man front where he can play multiple roles. But what I think he is I think he's Stephon Tuitt light for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's that type of player, interior pass rusher. He's got some juice to him, man. He's got long arms. Those things have to be 35+ inch arms. He has some absolute length. Tight ends trying to down block on him is an absolute joke. It's not even a talking point. It's not even a conversation. Odingbo is that guy that you're going to put on the strong side and you're going to ask him, hey, you got to defeat double teams, you got to defeat down blocks. And then when you let him loose a little bit, hey, this guy's an athlete too. He can move around a little bit. I think odd man fronts are going to love him. Even man fronts, I think might be some base potential as a defensive end, but I want him inside, beating up on guards and centers. Like that is where I think that his best ability as a pass rusher comes into. So number 10 for Vanderbilt in a season to forget for Vanderbilt football, 0-7, 0-8, whatever they finished at there. Dayo Odingbo is a very talented pass rusher who I think a lot of odd man fronts are really going to value heavily.
Odd man fronts, huh? So what was his measurables again?
He's listed right now at about 6'5", 6'6", 275 pounds. I think he's going to be 285, 290 before, would very, very easily hold that kind of weight.
You said a 4-eye. I was thinking, could he play that? I mean, he's tall for a 3 technique guy. I mean, he's long for a 3. I mean, typically you want a little bit shorter than that, more explosive guy to get up there. But I mean, you think about guys like Richard Sherman, who was that kind of a size when Bill would bump him down when they did go even front. They put him at 3, they put him at 3 and then they put him at defensive end. He could play both spots. So that just kind of came to my mind, where he was a taller guy who could play the 3, play and also play outside. And then, like you said, play in the odds, play in the 5, also play in the 4-eye. So
no. Richard Seymour is not a bad comparison either. That's a decent one with the length that he has.
Right.
I think that he can last as a base end, but you're not going to get the pass rush upside out of him. He's going to have to be a guy, hey, on third downs, obvious pass situations, you got to move him inside.
Yeah.
He doesn't have that flexibility, but what he has is outstanding length. He's got some power, And man, he's a really nice athlete fitting inside.
Was it Shawn Gilbert was another guy that just came to mind.
Yep.
Another long, big guy who had some weight to him. And like you said, you bump him, you keep him inside of there, and he can disrupt him, and give you some issues. Not quite a 0 or a 1, but, anytime on the strong side, you want to play him in those eyes, he can be good. Also in the 3. But what you got for me, John? Talk to me, brother, as far as your under the radar player of the week.
Well, we gave the Mormons a little love, and then we gave the Liberty Christians a little bit of love. So unfortunately, now we're going to take a little bit of love away from Houston Baptist because the Baptists are losing their quarterback. Uh-oh. So Bailey Zappi has entered the transfer portal, and if you watch the 4 games he played this year, it looked like a Madden game. He threw for 1,835 yards in 4 games. He threw for 567, which is a record for an FBS quarterback against an FCS school. Texas Tech still hadn't stopped him. 15 touchdowns, 1 interception. And when you look back, he's got about 10,000 yards passing and 80 touchdowns and about 35 career starts. He enters the transfer portal. Now, he is listed at 6'2". Will not be touching 6'2" anytime other than in the media game program. However, when we find out where a guy like this lands, it's going to be one of those type programs. Right now, Texas Tech thinks they probably have a guy, right? But it would not be shocking, for somebody in state, or similar to grab a kid like this and think a 1-year scenario like with Vernon Adams going somewhere and just going nuts, there. Somebody with a passing offense that's looking for a quarterback is going to get themselves a guy that's going to have a hell of a season next year on a much bigger stage and give their team an opportunity to kind of get a bunch of wins together in a very exciting style offense. He has plenty of arm. Again, he's not the tallest kid. Really nice release. And it's just his ability to make very quick, very direct decisions and put the ball wherever he wants it. And the other interesting thing is both of his receivers have also entered the portal. And one of them, led the nation with 105 receptions in 2019. Now, he's also about 5'6", so that gives you that, part of it. But, no disrespect to the Stearns brothers. If you put them on top of each other, you get 6'3", out of 2 guys. But, hey, it was 100 plus receptions, out of one of them. So I think Zappi has a chance to go somewhere, be super productive, and then we'll see what the NFL thinks of him, at that point. But a guy that's going to get on the radar, because of where he goes next. But at Houston Baptist, like I said, they play North Texas and they played Texas Tech. And the only reason they're in those games is because he's just going bananas, in both of those contests. And he was the only quarterback, I think, in recent memory to have 4 straight 400-yard games. Unfortunately, then they stopped playing, and that's all they played. But if you just look at his stats through 4 games and 1835 and 15 touchdowns to 1 interception, that's a hell of an accomplishment in just those games. And I think clearly not a guy that's underrated when you're playing for a major university. But I think Jake Ferguson, the tight end in Wisconsin, should he opt to declare, probably ends up in a much higher stratosphere of the draft than maybe what people would think today. Athletically, he's another one of those tight ends that can do stuff down the middle of the field. Kind of came in at 205. Now it's probably about 235 at Wisconsin. Wouldn't be surprising, to see him used as a guy that, teams that are looking for another one of those replicas of these tight ends that are doing that, he'll probably go into a program, like that and be able to give a team a guy that they might get in the 3rd or 4th round that can be able to produce in the middle of the field. He will probably test out better than a lot of tight ends.
Well, we're into overtime here. Appreciate that. So we'll keep a lookout for Zappi and where he's going to land. this coming up year. And, what's really cool is all the FCS schools are going to play. Maybe we'll have more stories, more players like this, coming out, during this almost like a spring football season, that we'll get from the FCS level. But yeah, guys, any parting shots from you guys on the panel before we close out the show? Ryan, I'll start with you. What do we got here for a parting shot goes?
Yeah, I got two things real quick. One very saddening, and then one thing that I think a lot of people can get a lot out of. One thing that just came down the pipe as we were recording was Ty Jordan, running back out of Utah, Pac-12 Freshman of the Year this season, has passed away. They don't have the details of what the cause of the death are at this point. But it is out there that he has passed away. Obviously, anytime this happens to anyone, especially a young man of this age, I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention this and just say that we'll be waiting to hear what the details of this situation are. But to the Jordan family, my deepest sympathies, especially at this timing around the holiday. So I just want to put that out there that I'm so sorry for this loss and the tragedy of what the situation is here around the holidays, especially. So just thoughts and prayers out to the Jordan family. And one thing that I wanted to talk about real quick before we get off is something that Neil Stratton at Inside the League and NFL Draft Bible are putting together. We've been talking about the unsureness of this draft cycle and what it means to a lot of prospects and hundreds of prospects that are trying to make the decision with this extra year of eligibility. Do I go back? Do I test the NFL waters? The transfer portal, like we said, is probably well over 800 at this point. There's a lot of people's futures that are really uncertain. A lot of people are making some very tough decisions. We always talk about, hey, trying to find an unbiased opinion, trying to find the right information out there. So looks like on January 3rd, which is a Sunday, next Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern time, hosted by Mr. Neil Stratton, as well as some other industry professionals like David Turner of Maverick Sports Consulting, Kevin Dunn, who is a trainer, owner of Test Football Academy here in New Jersey, Carter Chow, who is an NFL agent of Yes and Dublin Sports. We also have insurance specialist Rich Salgado of Coastal Advisors LLC. I think I will also be on this panel. This event is Inside the NFL Draft Prospect. It's the third annual, again, January 3rd, 8 p.m. Eastern time. For anybody who is making this tough decision, whether it's a player, it's a parent, you can RSVP today at sam@allaccessfootball.com. I'll be sure, NFL Draft Bible's already put it out on Twitter, but I'll be sure to put something out there later today as also. This is a free seminar. This is a free opportunity to talk to industry professionals, to get the opinion on what the state of the football world is right now, to make that decision, whether you are transferring, whether you're entering the NFL, whether you're going back, trying to get an unbiased perspective and opinion on what the draft process is going to look like on a typical basis, year in and year out, but also in this abnormal season where people are just trying to figure things out on a day-to-day basis. So next Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern time, I would definitely take advantage of that. Again, sam@allaccessfootball.com. Inside the NFL Draft Process live seminar brought to you by NFL Draft Bible and hosted by Mr. Neil Stratton at Inside the League.
Thank you for that, Ryan. Also, keep in mind, guys, you can still go check out the Friday Night Scout School from the NFL Draft Bible. All different things that you can learn about the game when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to just learning how to scout NFL players. Everybody, check it out. If you're interested in being like a true football head, go check this out, and you'll be able to scout like the big guys out here. John Murphy, what are your parting shots, brother?
Well, there should be a little asterisk on what Ryan just said, which is David Turner will be on only if he figures out how to check his emails between now and next week. So only if he is able to click on his email, hit refresh, find the email, click the link, and get in. Then David Turner will be on next Sunday. So we'll hope and pray, fingers crossed, that he can figure out how to do that in the next week. If not, I guess Ryan will have to do it for him as usual. So not surprising that not only does he not able to check his emails, but at least we had no misspellings and no incorrect ways of saying people's names this week. So, hey, Turner, you helped us out by not showing up. Thanks.
Well, like I said, guys, we already overtime. Crazy, man. This is Draft Bible Tailgate Show. I am Big Law, your host. And like I said, Saturday is, everything's winding down, all the games, but we will keep you up to date. We will have some more things to bring to you, even though the games are not going to be as plentiful as they usually are. We will talk about players that are coming up, players that have declared, players that may stay. So, just stay tuned to us, and we're going to make sure we keep you informed of what's going on in the state of football as well. But thank you guys for tuning in this Saturday. Enjoy your Saturday. Let's go, Sean and Claire's. We will be back. This is the NFL Draft Bible Tailgate Show.